Hey, what's up, y'all? All right, Wali Jamal, the Gator Man, is here. And it's time for my version of the Dark Chronicles, and Mark's taking us on the dark side in the Dark Chronicles numbered 62, which is piggybacking 61, which Tammy Dixon had done. And this one is called The Underground. My arms were strapped with black Velcro to an office-type chair on wheels. The dark room was filled with cigar smoke and much activity. I could see that there were people in the other rooms watching various sporting events on televisions. There was a large table in the center of the room. Several men paced around the room, two of whom were on their mobile phones. The one that seemed to be in charge was not. He glanced at me occasionally, as well as his watch. One of the men finished his phone conversation. As soon as he did, the man in charge asked him, "What did he say?" The tall man replied, "He just came in. It's on his way down." The man in charge seemed pleased. He made his way over to me. He motioned to the tall man, who was on the phone, and together they pushed my chair towards the table. Once there, he spun me around and spoke to me for the first time. "Are you right-handed or a lefty?" I said nothing, but I wiggled my right hand, which he noticed. His tall henchman quickly removed the Velcro strap that held my right forearm. He then spun me back around toward the table. The man in charge pushed several sheets of paper in front of me. He put his left hand on my right shoulder and leaned in towards me. He spoke again. "There's a guy coming in here with some papers. You're gonna sign them. And then you're gonna sign these as well." I had no idea. I had no clue of where I was, what was going on. I said nothing. I only observed. I heard a door open behind me. There was a light conversation, and then a young Hispanic man, dressed rather well, walked into the light. He briefly looked at me, and then the other mafia-type man placed a stack of papers in front of me. He handed me a pen and said, "Start signing." I didn't move a muscle. I was clueless to what was going on, and I had acted that way. The mafia-type man sat on the table and leaned down with his face inches from mine. And he said, "Listen, you've been through a lot. I don't want things to get any worse for you. You sign these papers, and you'll go home soon." He then got up and motioned for everybody to leave the room. I sat there confused about just what was going on. I waited a few more moments, and then, out of curiosity, I picked up a paper from the top stack. I slowly read what I made out to be a loan application. A foreign loan application. The majority of them were in Spanish. I looked through the balance of these papers, and they too were the same, each from different banks in different third world countries. My immediate thought was, I'm not going to sign these. But then I quickly remembered my predicament. So I picked up the dark-colored pen and I began to sign my name. My handwriting looked foreign to me as it emerged through the ink. I stopped momentarily to observe it. It was terrible and appalling, almost laughable. But I thought to myself, perhaps this was good. Maybe I wouldn't be held accountable for a signature that didn't appear to be mine. But deep inside, I wanted to do better. If only to try to find my true self, even if it was only through writing. I started again, picking back up somewhere in the midst of where I left off. It was what I thought was my middle name. Perhaps I repeated a few letters, who knows? This time I wrote with an attempt to write clearer, much clearer. But it was to no avail. It was the sloppiest it's been since grade school. As soon as I reached the very end of writing my last name, the door to my left opened with a mighty force, and the stout mafia man barged in, followed by his two henchmen. He went straight for the paper that I had just signed. He picked it up, studied it briefly. The henchman moved me far away from the table and reattached the Velcro to my right arm, once again fastening me to the chair. The Hispanic man coolly entered and sat on a small black couch across from me. The mafia man spread all the papers out across the table and then looked towards the room where they had just entered from. He nodded, and an elderly, frail man with a tan sauntered in. He reminded me of an Albert Einstein who had been fortunate enough to have received daily doses of sun. He sat down and immediately went to work. He picked up the paper I had just signed, he studied it briefly. The mafia man handed him the same black ink pen that I used, and in a rapid-fire effort, this old man signed each document, one by one, forging my name. It must have easily been a total of 12 or more. Once that was complete, he disappeared out the same door, just as quickly as he had appeared. The tall mafia man gathered up the papers as the stout mafia man sat on the table and lit his cigar. "Hey, you did good, kid." I guess he was talking to me. He never looked up as the tall guy put all the papers into a folder and handed it to the Hispanic man who had risen up off the couch at this point. The mafia man pulled a huge wad of cash from his pants pocket. He rifled through it and handed it to the tall man, who then, in turn, handed the money to the Hispanic man, what appeared to be well over $1,000. The young Hispanic man left the room with the falsified papers. The mafia-type man approached me once more. "Hey, you did good, kid. You thirsty?" I slowly nodded my head. Yes, I actually was beyond thirsty. It was like I hadn't drunk or eaten anything for days. "Hey, take him downstairs and get him a drink," told the other not-so-tall man. I don't remember how we got downstairs, but we ended up at a really nice bar. It was dark, but it really was an expensive-looking place. And there were other people down there, but I couldn't make out their faces. There was a slight thud from the music that played as people milled about. The man escorted me to the well-stocked bar and sat me down. He said nothing, and then he turned and disappeared into the dark room. Apparently, the first drink was on them. I asked the bartender for a Bacardi and Coke with a lime on the rocks. Sorry, even in my dreams, I wasn't a savvy drink order. I always been a basic rum and Coke drinker. I'm not ashamed of it. Hell, I can go for months without a drink, even a year or two. I actually only have a drink when I'm involved in a toast. There are more times than not at a Cas party, and it's usually champagne. I drank that drink quickly and ordered another. When the bartender came my way, she placed my drink in front of me and said, 37. So for the first time, I knew that I was in the future or else at a really fancy underground establishment. Without reaching, I quickly remembered I had no wallet. Before I could tell her this, She instructed me to place my right thumb anywhere on the glass bar and press down and hold it. I was lost. I'm like, say what? Here, she said as she grabbed me by my right wrist. Like many times before, I guess, with other clueless or inebriated patrons. She maneuvered my right hand into position, held my right thumb firmly down onto the cool, dark glass. After a few seconds, it slowly lit up with a warm amber glow. An image of a small bill of some sort appeared, complete with my total. My thumbprint was recognized, and at once an image of it moved away from my actual thumb like on a virtual assembly line. While she released her grip free in my hand, I watched in amusement as my electronic thumbprint made its way through several stages of the transaction until it was completed. Your bank will have an electronic receipt on file. She then moved on to tend to another customer. As I sat there and sipped on my cool drink, I couldn't help but wonder just what had happened that propelled me into this dark underground world. But for the time being, I was able to chill, unshackled and away from the villains, enjoying a moment of relaxation. To be continued.